Imagine the sound of a television clicking off, the screen fading to black. After 15 years, hundreds of episodes, and a multi-million-dollar empire, the cameras have officially stopped rolling. Today, we cover the final, devastating federal indictments that forced TLC to pull the plug, officially ending Little People, Big World forever. This was not a mutual decision or a graceful retirement. It was a forced shutdown, driven by legal liabilities that simply could not be ignored by the network executives. For a very long time, Little People, Big World felt like the safest show on television. TLC has a documented history of platforming large families, whose shows eventually collapse under the weight of real-world scandals. We watched the Gosselin family fracture completely under the intense pressure of fame, and we saw the Duggar franchise end in a highly publicized federal criminal trial. Through all of that network turbulence, the Roloff family presented a wholesome, reliable alternative. They were just an ordinary family in Oregon, running a pumpkin patch and navigating life's everyday hurdles. That early facade was incredibly strong, and I think it is the main reason why the ultimate downfall feels so jarring to longtime viewers. We grew up with them, and we trusted the narrative they sold us. Before the lawsuits and the indictments, we have to remember what this show originally represented. When it premiered, it was pitched as an educational look into the lives of little people. It was groundbreaking television. We were invited into their home not to watch them fight, but to watch them navigate a world that was literally not built for them. Matt was the ambitious dreamer, modifying the farm with custom tools and vehicles. Amy was the pragmatic anchor, managing a busy household of 4 children. The audience built a profound emotional connection with this family because their struggles felt genuine, and their love for each other seemed unshakable. This deep-rooted connection is exactly why the betrayal cuts so deeply today. We didn't just watch a business fail. We watched a foundational piece of our own television nostalgia get ripped apart by financial ruin. We all knew the family dynamic was fracturing over the last few years, but the speed of the final collapse was staggering. The show could no longer pretend it was about a happy farming family when the reality behind the scenes had devolved into a nightmare of litigation. The turning point was the secret $5 million fraud lawsuit. A lawsuit of that magnitude is an existential threat to any business, let alone a family farm heavily reliant on public goodwill. I don't have enough info to say exactly how the financial structures were manipulated to trigger such a massive legal action, but my read is that when a family business monetizes its daily existence for television, the boundaries between corporate assets and personal wealth become dangerously blurred. Let's look closer at the nature of a $5 million fraud lawsuit in the context of an agricultural entertainment complex. A family farm that doubles as a tourist destination has multiple streams of revenue. There are ticket sales, merchandise, pumpkin varieties, VIP tours, and massive television production stipends. When you hear about corporate fraud in this specific environment, it usually involves the quiet commingling of these funds. The lawsuit likely stems from money that was meant for the business or the family trust being funneled elsewhere. When you are dealing with millions of dollars passing through a seasonal business, the temptation to redirect assets can be overwhelming if the accounting oversight is weak. The fact that the lawsuit reached the $5 million mark indicates this was not a one-time accounting error. It suggests a sustained pattern of financial misdirection over several years. Running a large property while simultaneously managing television contracts requires flawless bookkeeping. A $5 million fraud allegation suggests a systemic failure of those financial boundaries. This legal battle alone would have been enough to severely damage the brand, but it was only the beginning of the end. The financial ruin extended far past corporate disputes and bled directly into deeply personal betrayals. The $200,000 inheritance identity theft is where the story shifts from a corporate misstep to a complete moral collapse. We often think of identity theft as a crime of opportunity committed by strangers, but statistical data shows that familial identity theft is incredibly common and far more destructive. When an inheritance is targeted, you are stealing from the future. That $200,000 wasn't just cash in a bank account. It was college tuition for the grandchildren. It was down payments on their first homes. It was the financial security that previous generations worked their entire lives to build. I think the psychological damage of discovering that someone within your own circle orchestrated the theft of your children's future is incalculable. It completely recontextualizes every holiday dinner, every birthday present, and every moment filmed for the show. You realize that while the cameras were capturing smiles, someone was working behind the scenes to drain the legacy. This specific financial betrayal is the core reason the relationships between Matt and his children are completely shattered. You can forgive a parent for making a bad business deal, but discovering that your inheritance was intercepted through identity theft is a wound that cannot be healed with a simple apology. We watched Zach and Jeremy walk away from the farm, and at the time, the public narrative focused heavily on petty disagreements over purchase prices and property lines. Now, the context has completely shifted. I could be wrong, but it looks like the sons realized the financial foundation of the family was corrupt and chose to sever ties before they were dragged down with it. They chose their own peace over a toxic inheritance, walking away to protect their immediate families from the financial chaos brewing at the farm. The unraveling became undeniably public with the airport arrest. Reality television stars are incredibly accustomed to controlling their environments. They travel with producers, public relations handlers, and security personnel who insulate them from the real world. An airport is one of the few places where that insulation completely vanishes. It is a highly secure, federally regulated environment where nobody gets special treatment. Being detained in an airport is a raw, humiliating experience that strips away all the glossy protection of fame. I am not sure what the exact tipping point was for authorities to intervene in that specific location, but seeing a prominent reality figure lose complete control in a public terminal signaled to the world that the Roloff invincibility was permanently gone. That massive loss of control brings us to the twist of the entire saga, which is the network's breaking point. For years, TLC executives tolerated a huge amount of interpersonal drama. They filmed the divorce, they filmed the bitter arguments over the farm's future, and they gladly capitalized on the tension for ratings. Network executives are business people who will broadcast family dysfunction as long as it remains profitable. However, the legal threshold for acceptable drama is very different from the moral threshold. We have to analyze the incredibly rapid ascent and spectacular crash of Caryn Chandler. Her journey is central to this entire collapse. She began her time on the property as an employee, a farm manager tasked with handling the logistics of pumpkin season. Over time, her proximity to Matt's ambition allowed her to transition from an employee to a partner, and eventually to a woman facing federal sentencing. I could be wrong, but it looks like the power dynamics of the farm completely shifted when she stepped into a personal relationship with Matt. As an employee, you are subject to strict oversight. As a romantic partner embedded in the financial structure of the business, those checks and balances often disappear. The transition blurred the lines of accountability. When someone suddenly gains access to the levers of a multi-million-dollar television empire, the risk of financial malfeasance skyrockets. Her presence became a wedge that separated Matt from his children, and ultimately, the legal scrutiny surrounding her was the catalyst for the network's final decision. When Caryn found herself facing federal sentencing, the corporate calculus at TLC changed instantly. You cannot issue call sheets to a federal penitentiary. Furthermore, with Matt heavily implicated in corporate fraud, the liability of continuing the show became astronomical. I think the network lawyers looked at the situation and realized that funding a production involving accused corporate fraudsters could potentially implicate the network itself. Reality television relies on a suspension of disbelief, but it also relies on legally viable cast members. To truly understand the network's breaking point, we have to talk about the mechanics of television production. A reality show is a massive corporate undertaking backed by insurance companies, legal teams, and advertisers. Every cast member signs a contract that includes a strict morals clause. This clause allows the network to terminate employment if a cast member engages in behavior that brings public disrepute or legal liability to the production. When the news of the corporate fraud hit the executive desks, the show became completely uninsurable. Production companies carry massive liability policies to protect themselves against lawsuits. If an insurance company discovers that a production is knowingly featuring individuals actively involved in federal financial crimes, they pull the coverage instantly. Without insurance, a network cannot send a crew onto a farm full of heavy machinery and public tourists. Imagine the logistical nightmare of trying to film a season under these conditions. The network lawyers deemed the liability too high, and honestly, they were entirely correct. Filming a family where the primary cast members might be communicating from behind prison glass was impossible. You cannot shoot heartwarming footage of a pumpkin festival while federal investigators are auditing the ticket sales. The fans who traveled to Oregon, who bought the expensive tours, and who purchased the merchandise genuinely believed they were contributing to a multi-generational family legacy. Discovering that those funds may have been swallowed by corporate fraud is a massive betrayal of the viewer's trust. The reality of the indictments completely shattered the illusion of the show, forcing TLC to pull the plug permanently. They didn't cancel the series because viewers lost interest. They canceled it because the legal department demanded it. I want to take a moment to look at the other side of this situation, because humanizing this disaster is important. What is the most charitable interpretation of Matt Roloff's downfall? Some viewers have pointed out that Matt is a visionary who built a massive, thriving farm from the ground up, fighting through significant physical limitations to achieve his dreams. People who disagree with the villain narrative often argue that running an operation of that scale requires complex financial maneuvering. A charitable read is that Matt simply received terrible legal and financial advice, trusting the wrong accountants or corporate compliance officers as the business scaled much faster than he could manage. Let's look at the physical realities of Matt's life. Matt has endured dozens of surgeries and operates in constant physical pain. Some fans argue that his relentless drive to build the farm was a coping mechanism, a way to prove his capability in a world that constantly underestimated him. People who defend him often say that Matt was simply trying to secure a massive financial cushion for his advancing age, knowing his physical mobility would eventually decline. In this light, the corporate maneuvering wasn't born out of malicious greed, but out of sheer survival instinct and a desperate fear of losing his independence. When you combine severe physical limitations with the pressure of sustaining a television franchise, it is easy to see how a person might rationalize cutting legal corners to keep the cash flowing. In this view, the $5 million fraud lawsuit might be the result of sloppy bookkeeping and aggressive plaintiffs rather than a malicious criminal scheme. Defenders might argue that the inheritance identity theft and Caryn's legal troubles stem from a catastrophic misunderstanding of corporate authority rather than intentional malice. It is entirely possible that the pressure to constantly create new, expensive attractions for the television show pushed Matt into corners where he felt he had to bend the rules just to keep the empire afloat. I think it is totally fair to acknowledge that 15 years of reality television fame can severely warp a person's understanding of normal legal business practices. However, acknowledging that immense pressure does not erase the reality of federal indictments. You do not end up facing federal sentencing over a simple filing error or a misunderstood tax form. The justice system requires substantial evidence of intent to move forward with charges of that magnitude. While I can sympathize with the overwhelming stress of running Roloff Farms, my guess is that ambition eventually crossed the line into arrogance, leading to decisions that destroyed absolutely everything he built. The climax of this story is a physical space. The final image of Roloff Farms is heartbreaking, yet undeniably poetic. The property now sits entirely empty. Roloff Farms used to be a vibrant, chaotic wonderland filled with tractors, western towns, custom bridges, and endless fields of crops. Now, the silence is heavy. Without the influx of television production money, the upkeep of these massive structures became impossible. The pirate ship, which stood for years as a symbol of childhood wonder and family legacy, is demolished. We watch the children grow up playing on that ship, and its destruction feels like the physical erasure of the show's history. That ship was a testament to a father's desire to give his children a magical childhood. Watching it get torn down piece by piece is a brutal metaphor for the destruction of the family unit. The big house is seized. The sprawling custom estate that Matt spent seasons obsessively designing and building was his crown jewel. It was the ultimate physical manifestation of his success, and now it belongs to the authorities. The sprawling acreage that used to host thousands of smiling tourists is now just an empty plot of land tied up in litigation. It is a harsh, unforgiving landscape that mirrors the isolation of its creator. The contrast between where the main cast members ended up is stark. Matt is alone in an extended stay motel. It is a steep, brutal drop from managing a sprawling agricultural estate to living in a temporary roadside room. He pushed his family away to maintain absolute control over the farm, and in the end, he lost both the family and the farm. He is isolated, facing the consequences of his corporate decisions without the support system he once took for granted. On the other side of the country, there is a deep sense of poetic justice in Amy's current life. For many seasons, a vocal segment of the audience criticized Amy, painting her as a negative force who constantly held back Matt's grand visions. We now know that her cautious nature was the only thing grounded in reality. She and Chris are happily traveling, entirely removed from the toxic fallout of the indictments. More importantly, she secured the future. The legacy of the family is protected by an ironclad trust fund for the grandchildren. By refusing to engage in the financial chaos and securing that trust, Amy built a financial fortress that the corporate fraud couldn't touch. She won by simply walking away and protecting what actually mattered. The Roloff dynasty is dead, but justice is alive. The era of little people, big world dominating the reality television landscape has come to a definitive and sobering end. It is a harsh reminder that the cameras eventually turn off, and the real world always demands accountability. It is the end of an era. Are you glad the show is finally canceled, or will you miss watching the Roloffs? Thank you for following this journey and for watching LPBW Update.